Hi everybody, it's Tatiana and today I'm coming to do a book review of Sweet Francaise by Irene Nemirovsky. I read this because this was one of Stephanie's over at Time to Read's favorite books of 2017, I want to say. I think that's right. And I put it on my radar, but if you are not familiar with Stephanie at Time to Read ! She enjoys stories that basically rip her heart out. And so I wanted to read this because this was her on the list of her favorites, but I wanted to give myself some space before I actually got to it because kind of wanted to give myself some time to prep for my heart being ripped out. And then Cynthia at Book Whimsy read it and did a review and discussion of it, and I did not watch her discussion because if you are not familiar with her channel, and both of these channels will be linked below, she is a French history professor, so I knew that there would be like information discussed in her video that I would not have prior to reading this book. And this is a historical fiction novel set in World War II France. And I have not read any, as much as I love books, historical fiction of tragic histories, I had not read any World War II stories that were based in France until picking this up. So I didn't want, because I didn't have any of the actual history prior to reading this, I wanted to read this first and then watch Cynthia's video, which I did. I'm going to put this book down because glare and heavy. I don't know what I liked more about the book, the history of the author or the actual story itself. I loved the book, but I also loved the story of the author, which is really bad to say considering how tragic the story is. Irene Nemirovsky was French, but she was also a Jew. And so this was written by her during France's occupation, or Germany's occupation of France in World War II. It is not a completed novel. It is parts 1 and 2 of a 5-part novel that she was going to write, and there are things at the end of the novel that I don't typically read all the way through appendices that are provided in novels where additional information is given, but I did for this, in this case, to read her notes so that I could see the line of the characters who were introduced in parts 1 and 2 that have been preserved unknowingly by her daughter. Her daughter, when her and her sisters fleeing into protection because they were also Jewish, grabbed her mothers who had already been taken and arrested in France. They grabbed their mother's things, and this parts 1 and part 2 of Sweet Francaise were among those things. And some 60 years later, her last surviving daughter actually got herself together to a point where she could read her mother's notes, because it was real tragic for her to do so, and saw that it was the makings of a novel. This is not the only novel that Irene Nemirovsky wrote. I didn't know that until talking to Dee Dee at Brown Girl Reading, and she's read one of her other books. I'm very interested in reading one of her other books as well. But there is a lot of information about the history of France during World War II and during Germany's occupation that Cynthia has over on her channel. So I'm going to link, actually, instead of just linking her channel, I'm going to link her discussion video in the description box below. I encourage you to go watch it. It is excellent. Absolutely excellent. So knowing what happened to Nemirovsky while she was attempting to put this piece of work together, and then reading the story, some of the story, I expected to feel a little bit like I felt the first time I read The Diary of Anne Frank, which I was in like 6th or 7th grade the first time that I read that, and I bawled uncontrollably after finishing that novel, because you could feel how unfinished it was. But having the author's notes in the back that she had written out that were not compiled because nobody put together the story, you know, for her after this was done. What we have is what was completed, moderately edited by the translator. So I was kind of scared that I was going to feel like that after finishing this, which is why, again, I put it off, because Stephanie likes things that wreck her soul. So, but that's not how I felt. What I really enjoyed about this story, aside from the history of the author, is that it gives you two looks at what goes on in France during the start of World War II and the bombing of France, and then the occupation of Germany into France. You have in book 1, which is called Storm in June, the people who are living in Paris who are fleeing because there's this fear and justifiable fear with these air raids that are happening and bombs that are being dropped, that Paris is basically going to be destroyed. And so they have to flee Paris to the safety of the countryside, and the dangers that they encounter during that fleeing, and how really unsafe it was, and how unrealistically a lot of people dealt with, or in my mind, unrealistically, a lot of people dealt with having to pack up themselves to escape death. There was this huge emphasis, according to the novel, of packing up like family heirlooms, china, like wrapping up your china sets and all of these linens, and cleaning everything before you pack them up to put them in the car. And what it ended up being was like there was this huge mass exodus out of France where everybody's trying to leave at the same time, which for those of us who have to deal with traffic on a regular basis produces gridlock. And then with gridlock, you have also the reduction of available oil for your car, so your car runs out of gas. You still need to get the hell out of Dodge. So what do? You get out and walk. And now after all, you've packed up all of these things, all of these heirlooms, you can't take them all with you because you have to carry them on your back. And so the difficulties and the hardships and the fear and the bombings and the lack of compassion that some people have for people who are suffering the same circumstances that they're suffering, but because they're a lower class of people, they have a lower amount of concern for their ability to get through it. And just seeing all of that, again, watch Cynthia's video. She speaks on this much more than I'm going to here. But seeing all of that in this novel form was just very interesting. And then part 2, which is called Dulce, you have a town that is dealing with being occupied by German soldiers, where the soldiers have come into that town and they've basically set up their livelihood in this town. They are taking over the stores and the available food that there is, and you have the whole thing with rationing being done, and they're taking rooms in people's houses, like knock knock knock, you ain't answer, I'm coming to fuck in, this is where I'm staying, you need to find me a room. You don't find me a room, I'm gonna take a room, but while we doing all of that, we gonna also take some of your stuff. And the effect that it has on the relationships of the people who are in town, what it looks like to those who are angry about the occupation, when you have those who seem to be complacent or complicit with Germany's occupation of this town. And there's so much that's put in here with the relationships that are formed between people and who are neighbors and villagers in this town, as well as the relationships that are formed with some of the occupying soldiers, and trying to view the soldiers as people being given orders and carrying out their orders, which works to their detriment, but still trying to understand and treat them like they're people. I'm gonna go. Thank you all for watching. If you have read Sweet Francaise, please leave comments in the comment section below, and share with me what you thought. If you have a review of it, let me know as well so I can go check that out, because yeah, this is a book that I wish I had read with other people who had like the same love for this part of history as I do. Thank you all for watching. Have a good weekend, whenever you see this video. Peace out.